Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining from. Please, can anybody hear me? Can you all hear me? I don't know, Chirand, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you very much. Once again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining from. And thank you for joining this important webinar session today. And my name is Oluwase Ibanjo. I'll be your moderator for this session. And I would appreciate if you can take a moment to drop our names and our locations in the chat box, please. Thank you. Your name and your current location. Thank you, Chineye from Lagos. Thank you, Gift, for joining the session. Hi, Godfrey, thank you for joining. Amarachi, thank you. Nanji Augustus from Anambra State, thank you very much. Amuni from Abuja, thank you for joining us. Abdulaziz, thank you for joining. Tina, thank you for joining us. Dr. Ime from Uyo State, thank you for joining. Rita from Asaba, thank you for joining. Ali from Kano, thank you for joining us. Rita, Farida Abdulaziz, thank you for joining us. Esther from Oyo State, thank you for joining. Toyin Yusuf from Abuja, we appreciate you. Toyin Ololade from Lagos State, thank you. Zaharaddin Ibrahim Musa from Zamfara, thank you for joining us. Okay, so if we still have friends and loved ones that are here to join, please share the link with them so they can join us. And we'll be starting the session soon. On behalf of Sterling One Foundation, I'm delighted to officially welcome you to our first ESG webinar for 2026. And this session is particularly important to us because it marks the continuation of the journey we started in year 2024. Last year, we had different sessions. We had 4 webinar sessions last year. One was a physical session during ACES, while the other 3 were virtual sessions. And we touched topics like advancing the social sustainability as a pillar of ESG. We also looked at advancing ESG goals through sustainable finance and green investments. We also looked at corporate governance and accountability, and we looked at driving the growth of the circular economy in ESG. If you are just joining us for the first time in this webinar session, I would appreciate you visit our YouTube page to actually listen to previous recording of all past ESG sessions that we held last year. And we also want to use this medium to appreciate all our partners, right from PwC to LBS to NGX to NECA to B-Lab Africa to LCCI and other partners that we're expecting on board for year 2026. We appreciate you, and we appreciate the collaboration, and we hope we'll be able to work more together this year. So this year, our focus is actually very clear, and today's session is designed to help organizations answer one particular critical question, which is how do we move from ESG disclosure to real and strategic action? Most importantly, what does it mean that there is a shift for African businesses? What are the expectations that organizations should expect in year 2026? And before I introduce the speakers, we have our question and answer chat box enabled. If you have questions along the line, you can make use of that to drop your questions while our speakers speak to us. And good day once again, and thank you for making time out to be part of our session. I'll be introducing our first speaker today in respect of Mrs. Olapeju Ibekwe. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Sterling One Foundation. She's a seasoned business leader, filmmaker, sustainability professional with keen interest in women empowerment, access to quality education, and better healthcare and youth development. With nearly 2 decades of corporate experience, she has built expertise in brand and marketing communications, strategy formulation and execution, team management and process improvement. She currently oversees all operations and initiatives at the Sterling One Foundation, a social change vehicle focused on tackling the root cause of poverty in Nigeria. Under this not-for-profit organization across Africa continent in capacity building, alternative financing, as well as amplifying impacts within the foundation's thematic focus area, such as healthcare, climate action, youth development, and women empowerment, as well as gender equality and food security. Under our leadership, the foundation has continued to push conversations that challenge organizations to move from intention to impact. Please join me in welcoming Olapeju Ibekwe for welcome and opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shay, and thank you so much, all our delegates that have joined us from different parts of the continent of Africa. We are glad to have you join us today at the very first ESG session we're holding with our partners in the year 2026. Before I go into the content, I would like to sincerely appreciate our partners who have made this session a huge success since when we started in 2024. I'm talking about PricewaterhouseCoopers Nigeria, Lagos Business School Sustainability Center, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, the NGX Group, UNIDO Investment Technology Promotion Office, and B-Lab Africa, and of course, Sterling Bank. Want to say thank you so much to these amazing partners who have stayed consistent to support the African ecosystem when it comes to ESG alignment and ESG implementation. Today, we're going to be talking about something that is very, very critical, which is from ESG disclosure to strategic action. What organizations must do in 2026. For those who are joining us for the very first time, just a quick look at who we are Sterling One Foundation is a registered not-for-profit organization. We were established in 2018 to serve as a vehicle for positive social impact, and we prioritize impact in health education, food security, climate action, and gender equality. We have a separate board of trustees from Sterling Bank, our partner financial institution that has been supporting us since inception. And we seek to see an Africa that is inclusive and prosperous for everyone to thrive. We create and support sustainable impact solutions that tackle the root causes of poverty and inequality across the continent. And the ESG webinar series is one of the initiatives that we birthed alongside our amazing partners. And I must sincerely appreciate one of our speakers today, Madam Oreva. I remember very well when it was just an idea. I remember speaking to her at the African Philanthropy Office, and her feedback was so awesome. It was a definite yes. Even before papers changed hands or changed emails, she was ready to support, and it's been amazing since the beginning with excellent positive feedback from various private sector organizations. Now, going into the topic from disclosure to strategic action. What organizations must do in 2026. We realize that on the continent, there are various forces that are reshaping how ESG will be implemented or will be accepted on the African continent. We see that regulation is changing, deadlines are setting in. In Nigeria, you will know that we need to be aligned, especially for public listed organizations. They need to be aligned to all ESG disclosures in alignment with regulatory dictates. We have the ISSB standards, they are forcing alignment, and by 2028. So the grace period for us to do it voluntarily as organizations, especially in Nigeria, is from 2025 to 2027. It becomes mandatory for 2028. Number two, so beyond regulation, there's more investor scrutiny. Asset managers are increasingly interested in companies that are fully aligning with ESG benchmarks. And while in the past it was a case of, okay, if you choose to, if you don't choose to, right now it is getting more interest from investors. There's need also for supply chain accountability. There's more due diligence laws that organizations need to align with, especially with focus on scope 3 emissions. And of course, there's physical climate risk, and I would take our time with that. So clearly, we see that ESG reporting is transitioning. I think for me, I think 2026 is actually the transition year where every serious-minded organization on the continent of Africa needs to know that it is clear that ESG reporting has moved from voluntary reporting to mandatory reporting across the African continent. Capital markets are increasingly pricing ESG risk. Investors are demanding these disclosures. And then, of course, for our regulatory roadmap in Nigeria, compliance is inevitable. What is wise for players in the Nigerian landscape in 2026 is to take advantage, because it is not just about, there's something about compelling people to do stuff that makes them repel action. I think this is an opportunity that every organization in Africa should take advantage of. In 2026, ESG is strategy. It is not just CSR, it is not just CSI, it is not just philanthropy, it is not just a nice to have, it is part of strategy. Now, I would run through this for the sake of our time. I believe we have wonderful, excellent facilitators in the room that are going to go in depth. But this was just to give us a view of the Nigerian regulatory landscape. Peradventure, there's only one in the room who is not aware of what is going on. I had mentioned earlier that public interest entities have to mandatorily report from 2028. And these disclosures, of course, should be integrated into annual reports. And these are regulations that we can all go and read up on. For the benefit of all those in the room, please note that all the slides today are going to be made available to you and sent to your emails if you registered for this session, so you can pay full attention to the speakers. And the recording would also be available online for your reviews, and you can always go back to share with your teams to listen to again. And this just gives you a snapshot on what is happening on different parts of the continent. Now, the problem is that historically, there seems to have been reporting without strategy. ESG reports for some organizations have already started reporting. Yes. And that's a plus. I must commend organizations that have started doing that. However, we need to ensure consistency and monitoring of measurable targets that are multi-year targets organizations can measure themselves with to see how they are making progress in alignment with their ESG strategy. There needs to be more board oversight, I think, including board capacity building for them to understand what it is they're even having oversight on. There's need for ESG to be integrated into the annual financial planning and even multi-year financial planning of organizations on the continent. And it is always good for there to be external validation of the data that is being reported by organizations. And I'm talking about ESG assurance. We think that in 2026, organizations must intentionally focus on making ESG a strategy for growth for the organizations as against just a compliance conversation. It should not just be an annual report checkbox exercise. Rather, it should be embedded in the strategy, in the budgeting, in the growth plans of the organization. It should not just be a siloed CSR team that one unit in the organization is owing. No, it should be a C-suite accountability conversation with board oversight. It should not just be about backward-looking metrics, no clear target, no year-on-year growth targets. We're talking about forward-looking targets now with evidence-based, science-based, you understand, logical pathways, right, for growth, right? We should not just be about, ESG should no longer be about what should make us look good. It should no longer be about stakeholder communications or public relations. It should be authentic stakeholder engagement, multi-stakeholder engagement, including the internal stakeholders and the external stakeholders, and co-creation of solutions and targets. And then it should not just be about carbon offsets, masking inaction. It should be absolute emissions reductions with clear transition plans for the entire organization. A quick one on actions that we think are imperatives for 2026. Integrating ESG into financial planning, which embeds sustainability KPIs into the entire financial planning and allocation process, and including executive compensation structures. We should build supply chain transparency in 2026. Leverage digitization for capturing the right data for us to be able to monitor and grow and ensure that there's movement from a point A to a point B. We should strengthen our social and governance foundations. And well, IWD is coming soon. We're talking about diversity, inclusion. We're talking about living wage commitments. These things we believe should be tied into executive pay where possible. And then adoption of standardized disclosure frameworks. And this should not just be the responsibility of one unit. It should be streamlined across the different relevant units. And these different leads can own different indicators. So this is a recommendation, but different organizations can work with what suits their structure. There should be a board ESG committee. Of course, not necessarily chief sustainability officer, depending on the nomenclature your organization uses, but there should be someone who is responsible for that task. Under finance and risk, operations and supply chain, HR, legal, and compliance. And this is a recommended road ahead from baseline assessment to target setting, integration, disclosures, and reviews, rinse and repeat. We believe that ESG leaders of tomorrow are acting today. Some, interestingly, have already started acting. So it is time for us to scale up. For those that are already doing these things I have shared, then it is time for us to see how we can also build the capacity of different organizations that are within our value chain and our supply chain. As a roundup, I would like to let you know that there's going to be a physical session for us to go deeper on ESG conversations. And that is the largest development focused convening on the continent that is private sector led. That holds in Nigeria. It's happening in Lagos, Nigeria at the Eco Convention Center. Eco Convention Center, July 22 to 24. So please mark your calendars. This is going to be, it's not yet live, so you're one of the very first that are knowing about the early bird discount. It's going to be going live within the next 1 week. So what you have on the website now is still a wait list. It is being co-convened by the United Nations System in Nigeria, the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, and the Sterling One Foundation, alongside over 60 fantastic, awesome, amazing leaders that are accelerating the sustainable development goals on the African continent. I'm talking about the Africa Social Impact Summit. It's happening July 22 to 24 at the Eco Convention Center, Lagos, Nigeria. You can register at the impactsummit.org, be part of the wait list, and when it's live, you can also be a part of that convening. We're looking to also host an international educational institution that would want to give us some more depth. So please keep your fingers crossed. Also, I would want to quickly mention to you that in furtherance of some of the conversations at the summit last year, Education Outcomes Fund, which is an international organization that seeks to address the problem of out-of-school children on the African continent. They have done this in other African countries, and they are launching in Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria, next month. We will be hosting an exclusive social impact breakfast session with private sector organizations that are interested in the education sector, right? And this is happening on the 17th of March at Radisson Blue. If this is of interest to you, I believe my colleague will be putting a link for you to register in the group. We would let you know once there's opportunity for us to be able to host you to join us at this exclusive session. I would thank everyone again for joining us at this session today, the very first ESG session. for 2026. Appreciate our partners, appreciate our wonderful speakers, and leave you in the good hands of our moderator, Shay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olakpeju, for setting the tone so clearly. It was quite an insightful session. Now to our next speaker, it's my pleasure to introduce Oreva Atonya, who is the director of the Sustainability Center at Lagos Business School. Oreva is a respected sustainability thought leader, academic, and consultant with deep experience working with organizations across sectors to integrate ESG into strategy, leadership, and governance. She leads the prestigious Lagos Business School Sustainability Center, a globally recognized knowledge hub supporting organizations and leaders across sectors to positively impact society and integrate sustainability practices in business. She also serves as a lead facilitator, designing and delivering sessions on sustainability in business and circular economy at the LBS Sustainability Center, as well as Enterprise Development Center and the Nigerian Climate Innovation Center. Apart from teaching and consulting, Oreva's work includes leading industry projects and studies in areas of sustainability, as well as social innovation, corporate social impact assessment, not-for-profit management, and so on. Our book publications include the 3-volume series, Management and Leadership for Sustainable Africa, published by Palgraf Macmillan, and the Triple Bottom Line of Corporate Sustainable Development, Comparative Study of Sustainable Development Practices in the United Kingdom and Nigeria Oil and Gas Industries. She has also advised and led the implementation of impact projects, working with organizations including the Coca-Cola Company, Tolaram Group, Ford Foundation, International Fund for Agricultural Development, Development Research and Project Center, and World Economic Forum Global Plastic Action Partnership. She serves on the board of non-profit organization focused on youth development and environmental conservation and regeneration. Today, she'll be speaking to us on the shift from ESG disclosure to accountability, what strategic ESG truly means for African businesses in 2026, the key expectations for organizations in 2026, and practical steps. Please join me in welcoming Oreva Atonya. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Oluwaseyi, for that introduction. And I'm very glad to be here on first edition of the 2026 ESG webinar series. When Peju was mentioning the first meeting or discussion we had about this, who would have thought that idea would come together so beautifully? And thank you very much. I want to say congratulations to Mrs. Ibikwe and the entire team at Sterling One Foundation for the consistency in hosting this learning platform. And I know it's touching and enabling and enhancing the capacity of so many individuals. I'm very glad that our institution is glad to be a part of it, to also make our own contribution. And today I'm very excited to not just be reviewing at the back, but actually coming in to present. So thank you very much for having me. Welcome everyone. If you've ever listened to me or interacted with me, you know that I won't let you just sit there and listen. You will have to respond to me in the chat at some point during my brief presentation. So I'm going to be the first person, maybe not, I wouldn't say attacking, but Pedro has set the tone. But my discussion today is going to be on the things that are going to be really front and center in your faces if you are a business executive, not just somebody who's passionate about ESG and sustainability. Because just like Pedro explained, the conversation and the required action around sustainability within corporate setting or business settings, whether you are a large corporate or an SME, is not something that is just a nice to have anymore. It has shifted. In Nigeria, particularly, the largest indicator, or the most loud indicator of that, is the adoption of the IFRS S1 and S2 standards as well, how we want corporates and businesses to report back to investors, regulators, and all their stakeholders. We don't just want to know how many naira or kobo you made. We want to know what the practices of the business are and what the outcomes that are non-financial will be, and therefore the implication of all that on the health of the business and the sustainability of the business itself going forward. So I'm going to put up my slides briefly. Please, you confirm for me that you can see it. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, just put it in slide mode. So I'm deep diving based on everything that Pedro has already explained, but going into the angle of the shift from ESG disclosure to accountability. It might have already been introduced. My name is Oreva Ogeneataya, or you can call me Oreva for short. I want to thank the research and industry engagement team at the LBS Sustainability Center for helping me put these thoughts into the presentation I'll be having today. So, corporate disclosures. This is not something that's new to anyone who's been in the finance space, whether you were starting a small business and asking your friends and families to contribute to this venture that you are starting, or you have run a medium to large corporate organization where you're reaching out to bigger financiers or banks to invest or support a business financially, to whether you're working in a larger conglomerate or multinational where you have to disclose based on regulatory guidelines to investor groups, whether it's a public listing, whether you're listed on a stock exchange, or it's private equity, where you have a group of investors, whether PE firms, individual high net worth individuals who are shareholders in the business. So corporate disclosure is not something that is alien to business. It's part of the practice. We want to know what has happened. You've been bringing out this product, you've been providing this service, what's the outcome of that? So it's part of the system of doing business. It's part of even running any type of organization, whether it's for profit, for good only, for philanthropy, or for impact. We all have to somehow go back and explain, report back, give results back to those who care about the business, who all are invested in it, right? But now the shift that has been happening since the understanding and increased adoption of the fact that businesses don't just contribute to only financial outcomes or gross domestic products. They also have non-financial impacts, which can be positive or negative. And that's the entire backdrop for why sustainability has evolved into something that's now ESG practices, ESG reporting, ESG risk management, supply chain, all those expressions of sustainability in a business. And yes, we've had the phase of, okay, let's just know what your emissions numbers are, especially if you are in an industry that has very high environmental impacts. Okay, what sustainability initiatives are you doing? You can't just be making all these profits. What are you doing to give back to society? So CSR initiatives, social initiatives, and so on and so forth. What voluntary framework are you using in your business? Are you complying with GRI? Do you have certain frameworks within the business that helps you manage these issues? Investors asking these questions, whether in investor calls or going even all the way to litigation in some cases to get companies to explain what they're doing. And then therefore even policy statements that companies that want to see on your website or in your annual reports. And all that was good and fine, but now it's a new era. So we're going beyond that ESG, ticking the box, making sure some beautiful documents are available on the website or for different people to view, to where you're now actually going to be held accountable for what you say. So I feel like right now, business leaders, even those who are responsible for ESG metrics particularly, or responsible in general for business performance, are kind of being put under pressure like this robotic fish in my slide, where he's saying, okay, wait, let me go and check and verify before I give you an answer. Because a lot of people are asking for answers, whether they are the communities or the consumers of products, the customers who buy your services, the regulators who are in charge of your sector or industry, the investors who are considering either investing or pulling out of such investments. You're seeing that there's a new phase, a shift to companies being pushed to be more accountable, to even show a lot more information and verify such information. So you're going to notice that in 2026 and going forward, like Pedro said, maybe I put this as more of recommendations. What should you be doing? You should be looking to verify the outcomes that you claim to have, moving beyond just narratives to credible and even audited performance data. You also have to recognize that the regulatory tightening is real. Mandatory standards, even those that are within your country or within the ecosystem, multinational ecosystem that you play in. If you have business partners who are in Europe, who are in ASEAN, who are in America, there are certain things they are actually going to be asking for more and more. It's actually not going to reduce, but in fact, it's going to be increasing. And then there's the capital pressure. Different businesses and different institutions are competing for the attention of the same group of investors or the same pool of funding, whether it's the traditional stock exchange investors or institutional investors. You're all trying to engage the same group of people. So what makes you stand out? Investors are now pricing in both the ESG risk and the direction, and therefore also looking at whether that would affect their return on investment if they engage with you, and whether the reputational risk and all the other angles around ESG or ESG material issues, whether you're a business whose business is more exposed to climate impacts, what mitigation or adaptation strategies you are employing. Investors are actually critically looking at those issues and using them to make decisions. So therefore, you don't want to be the firm that has not prepared for that or shown any evidence around that. So beyond the, okay, I have a beautiful sustainability report, what does this accountability phase bring? I think what it's summarized in this image I have in my slide, which is that now people are looking for what is credible, not just what is disclosed or beautiful. And what does that therefore mean? It means that your reporting must include credible data. It must include verified outcomes. If it's something that cannot be verified, I would advise that you do not include it or project it. If you have to disclose something that you don't yet have verification for, you would most likely have to state that clearly. Honesty is the name of the game now, because particularly there are people who are very, very, very interested, like that robotic, that Terminator image that was asking the robotic fish, answer me now. Before you answer, please make sure you have it verified. And then there's increased board responsibility around these ESG issues, ESG claims, ESG results, and therefore there's also consequent action. Now, the action on the part of if you are doing good and you can be verified to be doing good is that you will be building more trust. You would also be attracting more partners, stakeholders willing to support the business into its next phase, whatever that may be. And definitely you want to take advantage of that. But I wanted to point to why this is important, particularly because of the fact that ESG is not just now a reputational issue, it's also a litigation issue. So I wonder what's the level of the appetite that you have around exposure to ESG related litigation. Companies and business leaders also have to be very, very cognizant of this, that this is now part of the new normal. From 2024, 2025, you could see examples. For example, in 2021, the ruling against Shell in the Netherlands, and the board members, for example, at ExxonMobil, where activist investors are actually not just doing their activism in the boardroom, they are even going all the way to taking legal action around these issues. So here are three forces that are driving these shifts. three forces that are driving this shift, I want you to remember: regulatory tightening, capital market pressure, investors pressure, and then credibility concerns. We've been in that phase where a lot of things around ESG disclosure, ESG practice has been voluntary. Oh, in your own company, think of what is material to you, disclose it, write a bit report and all that. But now we're having a lot of this information now being more codified into specific standards, specific ways these disclosures should be made. And therefore, things like greenwashing, impact washing, social washing are becoming more obvious. And they're actually things that stakeholders take very, very seriously. So it requires that in your data has to have integrity. You have to even go the extra mile of doing assurance for the things that are even in reports or disclosures. And then within the systems to achieve this, it means you have to have clear ownership of who within the system, committee, board committee, an executive, CEO, COO, CFO, an executive team, management committee, executive committee, who's responsible for what. Because at the end of the day, these things are now becoming part of what will be consequences for either performance or underperformance. So ESG is now in the strategic era. It's not something that just a nice to do if you want to do it well. And as we've said, going forward, because it has now become something that is regulated or regulatory concern or requirement, it means it's not something you just do how you would like to do it. You actually have to learn fast and actually adopt and change quickly to be able to not just meet up with your own desires or the objectives of your board, but also the standards that everyone is now expected to meet up to since it's regulatory. So the constant fix, the context means that you now have to bring it into integration. So Pedro mentioned in her opening that a lot of times we still have some firms or companies who are looking at it as, okay, I have a sustainability department or a CSR unit that is under marketing or under corporate affairs, but you find that the issues that they now have to be reporting or disclosing about are not things that are within that siloed group. They affect everything about the business, from the strategic level to execution to the eventual results. So sustainability and ESG cuts across. And also you need to even be thinking about going beyond compliance, aligning your sustainability goals, ESG goals with the core operations, such that even the gatesman, even the janitor within the business understands the ESG aspect of their own role and contributes to the goals that the business has set. Hopefully they have set that already. So ESG adoption, especially in the African context, what are some of the pathways you have to keep in mind? We want to remind you of materiality, which the focus area here is, risk prioritization and even impact prioritization. And the key outcome there is that it has to be in the corporate strategy. Therefore, it needs board oversight. So Pedro mentioning that we therefore need to definitely see more board level capacity building around this issue so that the board oversight is actually effective. And then traceability. When we put certain information within our strategic objectives and eventually we're reporting it in the outcomes, we want to be able to trace where these results are coming from. So things, for example, if you're in the FMCG sector, things like supplier monitoring, value chain integrity, and verifying the data that is coming out of those places that you are then claiming and putting in your reports. And then another phase or path is then your investor and capital attraction. So looking at if you're going to start accessing or carbon markets, green markets, and things like that, you want to be sure that you're complying with the standards that are expected there, so that you actually are not rated low, but have high ratings and can access capital. So here are some key expectations that we want to share with you for 2026 is that your assured data integrity, moving beyond just narrative to verified performance and audit-ready systems, which means that you have to have put in those systems within the business before it gets to the time of reporting. For board accountability, for example, ESG oversight has to shift to even things that the CFO does or the audit committee does. It's not just going to be something under governance alone. You also have issues like AI value chain. How do you use the new technologies or higher computing powers to track these data and make sure that the integrity is there? So when you use them, there is no mistake or reputational risk exposures. Also, transition planning. We know that some of these issues may be more important or material in other climes, but they are still affected. They still affect businesses in Africa or social context or environmental context in Africa. Therefore, how within your own business, if it is a material issue, are things like the alignment with the Paris Agreement, net zero objectives, energy transition objectives, and decarbonization objectives. How do you integrate into that? Honestly, not just for the claim of being net zero. And here are some practical and strategic steps that can be taken in 2026. Companies that invest early in these three can build their long-term resilience to actually be able to be trustworthy for this new phase of accountability. One is governance, establishing clear board level oversight, defining accountability for climate, social risk, and sustainability objectives. Also, the quality of the data quality. So implementing robust data systems to ensure consistency, traceability, and audit readiness, well, assurance readiness, which is kind of the sustainability language. And then the strategy, embedding ESG into strategy, into the capital allocation, into the procurement systems, into how the business operates, such that it's not something that's on the side or an afterthought. So 25% potential cost reduction. And ESG is going to be something that is becoming more mandatory, like Pedro already said. But beyond the I want to comply, what are the benefits that you want to have? So this example of, I want to have 25% cost reduction in a particular area. Let's say, for example, diesel consumption. It then ties to the energy investments that a firm, for example, makes. So please align your ESG with the value and with the larger objective. So aligning ESG with business value ensures long-term competitiveness and access to global capital markets for African firms. But again, we want to ensure that you're doing this not just for being part of the bandwagon, but understanding how it is strategically useful. And then you have already set particular goals and objectives in line with the needs of your business, the objectives, and the long-term goals. And the example of 25% cost reduction in energy use or reliance on fossil fuel, for example, is a good example of how to do that. There are 5 priority areas that corporates can also look at in 2026 from those 3 we explained: strengthening governance, improving data quality, preparing for assurance or audit, integrating ESG in strategy, and then communicating with precision. And like Pedro said, we're not just communicating only to the people who can give us money, the investors. We also should be communicating within the business to the various ownership circles or ownership systems within the business, such that they are running their day-to-day, going into the market, competing, but doing it with a heart that has the ESG objectives of the firm at the center. So for strengthening ESG governance, here are some ways we can actually implement that. Board level oversight, like we've reiterated, defining the management accountabilities, integration of the risk frameworks as well. So it's not negotiable, it's actually something you have to do. In improving the data quality, it's more of investing in system, consistent methodologies, documentation of assumptions or things that are beyond the business's specific control, internal controls for things that are within the business's own control, and then clear audit trails so that when and if you are asked more questions, you can quickly confirm, like that my robotic fish. And then, this is related, and kind of a next step to that is preparedness for assurance or audits, structured data processes if you have done that investment, internal verification mechanisms if you have the internal controls, alignment with your audit standards, and then early preparation for external review, whether it's regulators, investors, or just a very enthusiastic NGO that may love your organization enough to check. integrating ESG into strategy from capital allocation, procurement processes, enterprise risk management, and the long-term planning, not a parallel initiative, but a core strategic driver. So ESG for resilience in business in Africa, wanted to also point out to you that it's also part of looking at how you look at resilience, your risk resilience, proactive management, not waiting to be kind of catching up or running ahead of issues that already become problems. And then being deliberate in building your stakeholders' trust, transparent engagement. Like we said, now it's the phase of accountability. Not just what you say, but can we verify what you say or claim? And we hope that you also know that you have to then take your strategic growth and capacity building very, very seriously. And this is not just in terms of even the people, but also the systems. We may want to capture a set of data, or we want to be able to track performance in this particular issue. Are we putting the systems to make sure that we have the capacity to do that? That is what we mean here. And these are 3 issues that will help whether a business will be resilient enough to be able to be held accountable when the time comes. So I'll leave you here with this conclusion that accountability is the next phase of your ESG maturity. And we hope that you adapt proactively to build trust and attract capital in 2026, because sustainability is also about the sustainability of the business's outcomes, while it also contributes positively to society and the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Herva, for this powerful insights, especially around accountability and improving data quality. It was quite an insightful session. So building on that foundation, I'll be introducing our next speaker that will take us further into execution. We'll take question and answers after the next speaker. And I'll be bringing up the next speaker with respect to Chika Ono Inamdi. She's a manager in the ESG Sustainability and Climate Change Practice at PwC Nigeria. Chika is a manager in the ESG Sustainability and Climate Practice. She specializes in guiding businesses through the complexities of sustainability by developing practical, value-driven solutions. Her expertise spans the sustainability lifecycle from strategy, development, and creating sustainable finance frameworks to assurance and the development of impactful sustainability reports. She's a skilled facilitator, and she frequently leads training sessions and workshops that translate sustainability topics into actionable insights for diverse audiences. She's grounded in background in financial audits, particularly within the energy industry. Chika brings a unique and commercially focused perspective. She is adept at navigating stakeholder landscapes and aligning corporate strategies with global best practices and evolving regulatory mandates. And today she'll be speaking to us on moving beyond reporting, translating ESG commitments into actions, integrating ESG into strategy, governance, and operations, as well as common gaps in ESG implementation and how we can address them. And I hereby welcome Chika Ono Unamdi to the floor. Thank you for joining us. Over to you, Chika.
Thank you, Shay, for that warm introduction, and thank you for having me. Hope my volume isn't low and you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to all our participants and those who have joined us today to discuss this very important topic. Like Madam Peju and Madam Moreva have stated, right, the conversation of ESG and sustainability in Africa is moving forward. We're evolving essentially. So we're moving beyond reporting what our performance is and looking towards integrating sustainability and using it as a driver for value creation. So give me a moment to pull up the presentation slides. Right. Right. So we are evolving in the conversation on sustainability, right? For a long time, it was primarily focused on, okay, because investors or regulators have required or suggested, right, that we report on sustainability performance. You find that organizations then focus on that suggestion to then report on certain sustainability information, right, per compliance mandates or a reactive point of view. But it's important that we also realize that sustainability goes beyond just meeting such stakeholder requirements or regulatory pressures, right? We need to start seeing, for businesses, we need to start seeing sustainability as a strategic value creation tool or principle, right, to enhance how we do business. If we take a step back to really look at the definition of sustainability, what it means for businesses and what it even means for individuals, right, across the globe, you'll find that despite the numerous definitions of the topic, right, let me leverage the most common one by the Brundtland Commission, where they are saying that sustainability is the ability to do business now without impacting the future generations from doing theirs, right, without impacting resources or negating how the future generations can do their own business or operate. You'd see that sustainability is truly at the essence looking at continuity, responsible business continuity. And for us to achieve that, we need to be able to internalize sustainability as a way to move organizations forward. We shouldn't treat sustainability as an afterthought, as a tick the box action to then come in, okay, because we just want to meet regulatory pressures or address these investor demands, but to actually use it as a tool for innovation, as a tool to access new markets, right? And that's the essence of this kind of conversations going forward. So you'll find that in the past, we've had multiple organizations who publish long, very flattering, beautifully designed sustainability reports, right? Speaking to their performance, who seem to also establish or make ambitious commitments and pledges, most notably maybe towards the environmental performance, looking to be net zero at a particular year or looking to reduce their emissions, right, from their operations at a particular year. They also communicate long-term targets, right? But you might find that those targets that have been communicated don't really have a basis, right? They don't follow a logical pathway to support such targets. And they also launch very, very beautiful and very interesting, well, I say, marketing campaigns that speak to their sustainability objectives that look very, very well accepted on the surface. But when you look at it at a deeper level, it seems like there's something missing. There is no foundation to support such campaigns, right? And because of such appearance, you might find that they often miss the mark on having a strategic approach to sustainability, how they've embedded that principle in their business operations, in their thinking towards their growth strategy, essentially, and the plans and initiatives they've put in place, right, to support them in that growth strategy that speaks to the sustainability perspective, as well as allocating sufficient resources, right, that would help support them in meeting those targets or meeting those goals that they want to achieve, and measuring and monitoring the progress, right? You might find that companies set targets, but they are not going back into measure those targets and to ensure that they are on track towards meeting those progress. And even if there were delays or deviations from that track, how to mitigate and address those deviations to also support them to continue to meet that target. So essentially, we find that there's a gap between how companies present themselves, what they say they do, or how they present themselves, and what they should actually do. And in what they should actually do is where that strategy thinking or where that sustainability integration into strategy comes to the fore. So if we take let's paint a picture, right, using these two companies, company X and company Y, who have different approaches to sustainability integration. From there, we can try and get a sense of what those different approaches can mean to the company and the kind of outcomes it leads to. So for company X, right, it's a mid-sized manufacturing company that has been reporting on their sustainability performance for over 3 years. So they've been disclosing on information such as energy use, the amounts that they spend on CSR, which is a very important topic for us here with our social focus, right? And the community donations. However, when we analyze company X, we can see that their approach to sustainability is more surface level. So they've not gotten buy-in from the board in terms of their sustainability strategy. They don't have a sustainability strategy that has been approved by the board. Then, and business units as well that also provide information for their sustainability reports just view it as an annual exercise. It's not treated as a priority in such a way that they're able to maintain and manage proper data governance throughout the year, leading to the annual reporting. And then you then find that there would likely be data quality challenges for such a company, right? And inconsistent disclosures because the business units don't have full or understand rather their responsibility or their ownership of such data, right? You might find quality issues and data management issues arising from such reporting endeavors. And then you see that targets that they have communicated in their reports seem disconnected from their financial planning. So they may be stipulating that they want to achieve X, but in their financial planning, there is no allocation that supports meeting those targets. Then what then becomes the result is that you find that because they are reporting, they are meeting regulatory demands, right? In the short term, there will be reputational gains, of course, because to the public, you seem to be in a good position because you're reporting year on year. However, by the time you analyze it or move beyond that short-term view, you then now see that there are inconsistent data issues, data quality issues continue to arise. And then for them internally, there would likely be recurring assurance issues, right? Because when the assurance providers or the auditors come in to review those data, there's poor management of documentation or evidence to support the information being assured, right? And then you find that sustainability is not, that hasn't quite caught a hold in the company, right? It's still focused on reporting. So there's limited spread on what it could mean to the company's operations. But for company Y, they are also a mid-sized manufacturing company who has even been reporting for far less for 2 years. But they are focused on their reporting and have been disclosing material sustainability information, keeping in mind that your reporting isn't to then just spread or give information about all your sustainability performance. You're supposed to focus on material information to your report users, to your stakeholders. Then on deeper review, you can see that the approach to sustainability integration is more genuine, is more integrated into their culture and their DNA. The board has bought into the topic of sustainability and how it drives their business. They have a board approved sustainability strategy. They have a dedicated sustainability integration structure. So it's not just kept aside or treated as a responsibility of one unit. Every unit understands how they play a role in supporting that sustainability driven growth strategy, right? And because of that, sustainability is truly embedded and integrated into capital allocation, into financial planning, into budgeting, into product innovation, right? And it's basically a holistic approach to data governance for sustainability at company Y. What that would mean is then that they have better quality reports being produced at the end of the year, and over the long term, greater reputational gains, right? This would also, over the long term, lead to operational efficiency and cost savings, as well as better risk anticipation, because you're coming from looking at material information, and that helps you also identify and possibly support your approach to addressing material sustainability risks to the business. And importantly, because they have that good foundation, they are able to have less or minimal issues with assurance, right? They have the necessary evidence to support or to give the auditors when they come in to support the reports that they've made. So this really is just to paint a picture of why we need to have that sustainability thinking embedded into strategy. Like Madam Oreva had said, we've moved beyond disclosure. We are not longer focusing on just reporting your sustainability performance, right? And it's important because of that evolution, we need to take a step back to reassess where we are, right? We are not reporting should be based on your performance, what you have done. And if you don't have a foundation to build that performance on, you would find that reporting becomes difficult. You're not able to gather the relevant data to report. You're not able to fully meet the requirements of the reporting standards. In our case, coming from 2028, particularly starting with PIEs, you'll be expected to use the IFRS S1 and S2 to report. There are a lot of requirements there that the S1 and S2 standards stipulate. And if you've not established a very strong foundation, it will be quite difficult for you to meet those requirements, right? Which is why strategy is the first step you need to take in your sustainability journey. You need to reassess how you use sustainability as a driver to push the business forward, and at the end, be able to then report on what you've done for the year. So you'll find that we've kind of, will I say, outlined a roadmap as to how strategy drives your sustainability journey forward, right? Starting with developing a sustainability strategy and setting from, as an output of that strategy, it will contain the goals and targets you want to achieve. And then you essentially stipulate or implement a sustainability roadmap, which is to then speak to how you want to implement the actions, carry out the initiatives that would drive you towards the goals and targets, right? And then importantly, you need to carry along your key stakeholders as part of this journey. So for internal stakeholders, that would be the employees, it would be the management leadership level team, essentially, right? And then for your external stakeholders, that could be your host community, because their issues could also bear weight for your operations, right? And as well as your regulators, your investors. Then it's important, we're in a digital age. It's very important that we are able to leverage technology, right, to also support that sustainability implementation, and also continue to measure and track the progress, as well as helping you to then now see what where there might be deviations from the plan, as well as ways to then address those deviations to return to the plan, or if need be, change to evolve with the landscape as well. So we find that when we speak to this topic of sustainability and strategy, the traditional thinking has been to treat sustainability as an afterthought, as an add-on to the existing corporate strategy, essentially. So you might find that most companies today still treat sustainability as coming after they've already established their corporate strategies for their businesses, right? Then it's now maybe now relate to addressing certain issues like the emissions, for example, or the CSR spend, right, for example, or some few other areas like waste management, if at all. But the perspective we should actually take on is to see how sustainability should drive the strategy. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It should actually be the foundation or the basis of the strategy going forward. It should be the lens or the perspective to which organizations across Africa should treat the topic or should push their business growth going forward. Essentially, if we do this right, if we evolve correctly, right, we should be seeing sustainability as that lens of how can we treat, or how can we innovate, how can we expand our business model, how can we leverage, for example, our waste to access new revenues, how can we change our operations as well to ensure that we are more efficient. It may cost a bit more in the short term because of those kind of implementations, but over the long term, you find that it will then help you meet your sustainability needs, right? Looking to address those gains you want to get economically, and while minimizing negative environmental and social impacts, right? Essentially, sustainability should be the foundation to any business's corporate strategy. It shouldn't be treated as an afterthought or a tick the box action. It shouldn't be tacked on afterwards, but it should be there to also help you push towards the growth you want to achieve in the coming years. It's also important that strategy can also be viewed. At times you find that companies view that sustainability strategy in a short-term point of view, where they maybe only focus on the 1 to 3 years. But it's advisable to also expand that to have a long-term view as well, so that you're not missing out on potential goals or potential targets that cannot be achieved in the short term, but can only be achieved in the long term. However, your short-term activities will lead towards achieving those long-term goals. Madam Mariva had already stressed this. Just to touch on it a little bit, right? A little bit more. Sustainability strategy is very, very important at this stage of the business landscape, right? It speaks to how we are able to address emerging risk to the business coming from environmental and social concerns. Also speaking to regulatory readiness, in as much as we want to advocate for not us moving beyond a compliance point of view or a compliance mindset, that doesn't negate the fact that sustainability strategy still helps us to ensure that we are ready towards any regulatory changes. And interestingly enough, it would even push the businesses to be proactive in their readiness or preparations towards this kind of regulatory expectations. There's also the alignment with business goals. Like I've said, because sustainability should serve as the foundation for your strategy, there shouldn't be a difference or there shouldn't be a parallel thinking in terms of how you view sustainability and your core business strategy. Because it's pushing your business growth, it's supposed to drive that progression to the next phase of your journey as a business. It's also supporting in enhancing your reputation and trust. The newer generations are now growing with the conversation of sustainability at the top of mind. So it's important that now these newer generations basically represent a new group of consumers, a new group of stakeholders, a new group of buyers, right? Even interestingly, even a new group of investors. So they are thinking from that sustainability point of view, and it's important that because they do so, the trust they would have in companies that have really established themselves with that principle or built on that sustainability principle would truly be enhanced when they see such evidence. And also it would help with operational efficiency and innovation. Sustainability is calling for us to think differently. How can we do what we're doing today, but in different ways that would ensure resource efficiency and ensure that we're able to still continue our business longer down the line. And of course, it also pushes for long-term growth and competitiveness. Now, when we speak to sustainability strategy, you might find that I'm referring to sustainability strategy, but please bear in mind that I'm actually advocating for sustainability in the corporate strategy. So I'm not treating it as a separate strategy from the traditional corporate strategy, right? So what you find as key elements of such a strategy is that would help define the organization's long-term sustainability ambitions, what they want to achieve and why they want to achieve it, right? It also helps set clear and measurable targets across the different pillars of sustainability. You might typically hear sustainability referred to as ESG as well. Those are the pillars which we kind of view sustainability through. But there's another important pillar that sometimes people often forget to consider, and that's the economic pillar, right? Sustainability, we're in business to make profit. Sustainability is not negating that. We are ensuring that we are still able to make profit while also addressing or reviewing or checking for other risks and opportunities coming from the environmental and social and governance pillars. And then the strategy is also helping to check and track progress using the KPIs and metrics you've articulated in that strategy, right? If you, for example, you have a goal of minimizing the waste coming out from your production plant, right? Your KPI might be looking at the amount of wastewater treated or looking at the amount of waste packaging that has been recycled and imputed back into the production line, right? And then it also outlines the actions, the strategic actions and initiatives you want to execute, or you need to execute rather, to achieve the plan, as well as roles and responsibilities of those that would support achieving that plan. And then it's also, excuse me, the strategy also identifies those material sustainability topics that will be relevant for the company to focus on first, right? So remember that strategy is a living document essentially. It's supposed to be updated as need be, right? It's not a fixed set in stone plan. So as needed, as regulations change, as the business landscape evolves, you need to also reassess what is relevant to my business that would ensure that I'm able to push forward and grow despite the disruptions that might be coming from technology, from consumer requests, or from investors' pressures, right? How am I still able to embed those issues or those priorities and shape how I'm going forward? And to start that process, right, about embedding sustainability into strategy, it's important that businesses start to ask themselves a few questions, right? I've painted a picture of how sustainability helps push the business forward, right, as a lever for growth. So it's important to then now reassess what kind of sustainability risk can impact the business. What are the opportunities available for us to capitalize on that can give us a competitive advantage, essentially? What's the market saying? What kind of pressures are coming to the forefront, are the loudest or even the lowest one? How important is that to the business? What regulatory requirements are coming up, right, that would impact how we do business? What considerations do we need to start putting in place in how we govern ourselves, our governance structures, in how we procure our supply chains, in how we manage our energy use, in how we invest in the new assets we are bringing on board, right? Or the asset diversification we might have to start implementing to ensure that we are still sustainable. What kind of targets do we need to set? What timelines are we attaching to those targets? And how are we able to adapt and evolve, right? Despite any changes to the regulations, despite changes to the landscape, how are we evolving? So with those kind of questions in mind, right, it will then now start to send a message across of, have we truly looked at all that can impact our business in building our strategy? If we haven't, what do we then need to do to address that? Now, speaking to the how do we go about building such a strategy? How do we go about embedding sustainability into our existing strategy, right? For those who might already have one. Now, it's important that you assess where you are now. It's important to understand what gaps currently exist, how you might be performing against your peers, for example, how you might be performing against regulatory expectations, how you might be performing against, will I say for some companies, they might have a competitor that they aspire to or they wish to overtake. How are you performing against those? The targets you might want to set. What is the current existence? What is the current baseline? What's the current situation relating to those targets? If you have emission reductions targets, for example, if you're emitting at a higher level this year, realistically, you need to then ascertain where you are now for you to be able to tell when you'll be able to reduce those emissions for feasibility. So by understanding where you are currently, it gives you a good foundation to then understand what to do next in terms of where you want to go. So in developing the strategy, you build on that current state assessment or baselining activity you conduct, and then assess and determine what's the vision and mission in terms of our sustainability view, right? What's our ambition as a company? And then we then now need to now focus on material matters. Have we ascertained, have we gathered and identified material issues that are relevant to the company? You might be operating in the same industry, for example, the FMCG, but your own material issues may be different from others in the same industry. You need to ascertain what is contextual to you, depending on where you operate, the regulatory climb, the communities, priorities, the issues that you are also seeing internally that are relevant for business growth. And then from there, you're able to then now develop goals and set targets. Afterwards, it's also important that you then establish a roadmap, an implementation roadmap, which is there you articulate who is taking care of what kind of roles and which units will be involved in this, in making this strategy come to life. And how are they involved? To what extent are they involved? Do they understand their involvement, right? The timelines that we're also establishing to make sure that we are meeting these targets, and how we are able to monitor that these targets are being met, right? As well as what kind of gaps do we need to close as well? Is it in terms of building capacity? Is it in terms of making sure that this understanding of the strategy is clear across the organization? You might find sometimes that organizations will develop strategy, but the units actually implementing do not understand why they're implementing what they're supposed to implement and even what they're implementing, right? So it would then lead at the end of the day that you're not able to make as much progress as you should. Then importantly, like I've mentioned, strategy is not set in stone. You need to come back and refine it. So you might find that some companies set strategies for 6-7 year blocks, so that afterwards they come back to refine. That's not to say that within the 7-year block, if a significant issue were to arise, they would not also consider that and try to find a way to address it. A strategy is supposed to be a living document to guide how the business would grow and continue to evolve, right? And as needed, you continue to recycle, or you continue to come back to this cycle to understand where you are, the changes you need to address, and the other issues you might need to incorporate to support your growth strategy. So we find also that there are several barriers to implementing sustainability effectively, right, across companies. Some of the more common ones are: one, organizational resistance and culture. You might find that at some companies, once they hear sustainability, there's immediately a wall that comes up that, in fact, what are you talking? That this conversation is redundant and not useful. So it makes it very, very difficult for that conversation or for that principle to be as widespread as it needs to be, right? Particularly when the conversation is brought up from, let's say, sustainability professionals or other professionals working in the company and trying to take that conversation up towards the board and towards leadership. You might find pushback, right? And then there's also the case of limited resources and cost implications. Because this is a change coming to the company, right, there's likely going to be resource implications attached to it. You might need to hire new professionals that have the competency in sustainability and that can help you implement the strategy. You might need to also implement new technology as well to support the strategy as well. So that upfront cost implications can be quite high, as well as knowledge and capacity gaps. Do you have teams that are well aware of what they need to do and how they need to execute the strategy? And then a lack of clear vision and goals. You might find that some companies would set ambitious goals and targets, but it's not clear what that is trying to translate or what that's trying to meet. You're trying to be as ambitious as your peer, but you're not considering where you are now and the gap that you would need to address. It's important that there's a gradual well, I say process to it, right? It's not instantaneous. There's a gradual growth to it as well. If both companies have been playing in the same industry, let's use company X and company Y, right? Like I mentioned earlier on, company X has to look at where they are currently before they can now start striving to push to where company Y is, or even surpassing company Y. If you're not able to truly look at your current state, you will continue to make ambiguous or overly ambitious targets that would not lead to any would not bear fruits in the future. Then importantly, there's the issue of siloed integration. For a long time, the concept of sustainability or sustainability implementation has been relegated to a singular unit. Now, that is not to say that a unit does not need to still be in charge of leading that conversation, but we are trying to say that a unit is leading that conversation, but other units also support that initiative. So if it's not clear from the jump that while the sustainability unit, for example, is in charge of helping us execute this, the other units such as HR, finance, operations, communications, all play a role. So they need to understand that role for them to then support the business, support the sustainability units in achieving the goals and targets that have been set. So it's very important that in trying to address these barriers or address these issues that might come up during the course of implementing a sustainability strategy, it's important that we consider a few things. First off is governance buy-in. Honestly, if the board is not on the side of sustainability, it's important to get them on board, because there needs to be oversight from the board from the jump. There needs to be oversight of sustainability. Otherwise, sustainability integration will be such a difficult such a difficult battle and an upward and a very tricky one to implement successfully, essentially, right? And then, like I've mentioned, it's important that you also conduct key assessments so that you're developing a contextual strategy for your business. You're looking at your material issues, you're conducting current state assessment, gap assessment. You're looking at, okay, baselining for your emissions, for example, the outputs or your consumption data to ensure that this is your ground zero. And as we continue to progress, we are continuing to be able to compare ourselves to ground zero. Now, it's important that once the strategy is established, that you're able to cascade the KPIs that are coming from those strategies to the relevant units so that they are able to take ownership and understand their responsibility in driving that strategy forward, right? It's also important that adequate budgetary allocations are made, as well as even human resources. That in trying to achieve or trying to implement your sustainability strategy, you are assessing the requirements to make that a successful mission, right? You're checking what financial needs are needed to be earmarked for this, and what kind of human resources or capacity do we need to build, right, to make sure that we are able to achieve this strategy. It's also important that we are leveraging technology, right? We are no longer using pen and paper for the sake of using pen and paper. We are now in a digital age. How are you able to leverage existing software and programs to help you manage that sustainability data better, to help you ensure that you're gathering the relevant data accurately and consistently, right? Minimizing errors and helping you ensure that you're ready for assurance as the time comes. And importantly, you're also able to foster cross-functional collaboration, right? What that does is that you're able to get insights from the different units, come from the understanding of their responsibilities, and enhance what you have on ground and achieve the goals set in the strategy. It's also important that you're consistently monitoring regulatory requirements. With the advent of the S1 and S2, that's important that you are taking that into also understand what are your reporting requirements so that you're well prepared to meet them. And then you also engage your stakeholders meaningfully. You continue to engage them through various avenues and forums. You might be engaging with your communities through a complaint mechanism, for example, or through a supervisor that interacts with those communities, and you're taking that in to also see how that will support the strategy or how you've addressed some of their issues already. And then also taking in even feedback from your employees as well. That's also helping you to then now take up and then understand, okay, what changes do we need to make? What changes have we made? All right, and how are we growing forward with these parties on board? Importantly, it's we're trying to extend the conversation on sustainability not just to one company. No company, like they say, no man exists, is an island, right? So think of that in the business landscape as well. You're not working alone. Across your value chain, you have suppliers who provide inputs for your business to operate, right? So it's also important that your strategy also accommodates and considers how you can influence your supply chain essentially to support you in meeting your sustainability goals, right? Looking at maybe establishing minimum sustainability requirements for those suppliers to meet, right? And also having capacity building sessions for them or interactive sessions for them to also take in their own concerns as well. They form as well part of your stakeholders. It's also important that you're able to leverage partnerships and collaborations to support you on that journey, right? You might find that collaborations with industry peers, non-profits, government, academia, industry associations, right, can also drive the implementation of sustainability a lot further and help you achieve the goals you've set for your company. Now, we've also emphasized accountability and transparency earlier on, speaking to how you report and the quality of data you're reporting on. So by the time we've established all these other principles or all these considerations we mentioned earlier, transparency in reporting wouldn't be as difficult because you've already established or laid that foundation for sustainability implementation. And as always, you have to continue to monitor for growth, monitor for issues, monitor for risk, monitor for opportunities, right? So that your strategy continues to be as resilient as it can be. To kind of focus a bit, because cross-functional collaboration is so important to the success of sustainability strategy, right? It's really, really important that if we are to take home any message today, we have to take this, right, as part of the key takeaways, that you're able to get on board all relevant units to support the implementation of your strategy, of your sustainability goals, right? Not just focusing on sustainability units. All other units across the business need to understand the role they play, right, and how they can collaborate to achieve that strategy. So using this as an indicator, you might find the HR unit, the human capital unit, the risk management unit, the technology unit, the corporate communications, the operations, the administration, right? The supply chain unit, the finance unit, all play a role, right, in driving how sustainability is implemented. If any one of these units, and even more, if any one of these units do not play their side, you'll find that data in that aspect will be affected. The targets that linked to that unit as well would not be achieved, right? And you're not able to then find, or rather there'll be more limitations in your ability to find ways to use sustainability to innovate. So it's very, very important that as you develop a strategy, you also ensure that that understanding of collaboration is made clear, right? This might be done through awareness sessions done in the company after the strategy has been developed, right? To make each unit or representatives from each unit to understand that this is how they come in, and to also hear from them as well to maybe see, do they understand what they need to do, and if necessary, establish like capacity building sessions to ensure that they are able and capable to help the business meet their sustainability strategy needs. So I would want to wrap this up by emphasizing that we are evolving. The business landscape is seriously evolving. And if businesses are not adopting sustainability as they need to, they will be swept aside. So in adopting and in implementing sustainability, it's important to remember that it's a journey. It's not a definite destination. You will continuously be on the journey. So either you're starting the journey or you're continuing that journey. It's a consistent cycle, right? But nonetheless, no matter where you are on that journey, we need to continue to remember that it shouldn't be a tick the box action. It shouldn't be because we want to meet compliance mandates, right? It shouldn't be a compliance exercise. It should be treated as a value-driven exercise so that you're able to grow as a business and ensure that you are meeting your consumer needs, maximizing opportunities for your business, winning from cost operational savings, right? And establishing yourself as a leader in your industry, right? And it's also important that you set targets, you set initiatives, you set goals that are contextual to your business, that are realistic to meet as well. And then you carry along key stakeholders in shaping and executing that strategy, right? And then you're communicating your performance based on that strategy consistently and accurately. We can't emphasize this enough, consistently and accurately, for year-on-year tracking and benchmarking for both yourself and for external stakeholders, right? I think that would then now lead to the end of my session. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Chika. This was quite an insightful session, and I want to believe we've all learned one thing or the other. Like we've learned why sustainability in strategy matters. We've also learned that it is very important to align sustainability with that sustainability goals with the corporate vision and mission. You also talked about considerations for implementing sustainability, such as stakeholder engagements, fostering cross-functional collaboration, monitoring and continuous improvements. And you spoke about accountability and transparency. Thank you very much. It was very, very, very insightful. And between Oreva and Chika, I see that we've gone from the why and to the how. And I think they've both given us a tremendous amount to think about and how we should act on. So from here, we'll be moving over to our question and answer. From where I sit here, I have some questions with me, and if you still have more questions, you can drop it in the chat box. I can see 3 hands raised. I don't know if they have question. I would appreciate if you drop it in the chat box, please. That's Mohammed Buba, Saidat Faribat, and I can't see other hands. F.O. If you are the one, just drop your questions in the chat box. Thank you, Chinwe. It was such an inspiring, thank you for your comment, Chinwe. The session was inspiring. Thank you once again, Chika and Oreva. So the questions I have with me, this one is directed to Oreva. I don't know, do we still have Madam Oreva with us?
Yes, I'm here. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. So the first question I have here is, you talked about strategic ESG and African context specifically. What do you see as the single biggest mindset shifts that African business leaders they need to make in this year, 2026?
Okay, thank you, Shay. Is that the end of the question?
Yeah, so that's one that I have here. Or do you want me to
Okay, I
take
can
all the
take it.
questions for you?
No, let me just quickly
Or-
take that one.
Okay.
I don't think there's just one most important shift that business leaders in Africa have to make regarding sustainability and ESG. I think the economies across Africa are they're in one continent, but they are kind of in different worlds in many ways, depending on the regulatory environment, type of economy, and so on and so forth. You know the history of Africa and why things are so disaggregated. So depending on the type of business, the type of sector, I think it goes back to what Chika says that understand that sustainability business leaders do need to come to their own let's say their own decision about how sustainability will be applied in the business they are responsible for. And this is whether it's a board level, like board leader, someone who's the chairman or an executive director or non-executive director in multiple businesses, or someone who's the CEO, main leader of one particular ship, where we are thinking about that particular business's own goals, objectives, things you're responsible for that particular business. So I don't think there's just one thing. I think the main takeaway, just like Chika has said, and kind of giving flesh to what Pedro and I had said, is okay, we're in another year, we set targets, we have these ambitions and all that. Let's make sure that those ambitions and those business goals still align with the overall corporate purpose. And most times, when you look at the corporate purpose of any business, you would usually not see Naira and Kobo, whatever currency, Ghana cedis and this. You won't see that in their corporate purpose. Yes, businesses are to make profits. Profit and financial cash flow and financial returns are like the lifeblood of the business. But like you're a human being, you don't exist just to have blood in your body. You need blood to continue existing. You need oxygen. But you don't exist for the purpose of just producing blood, right? You have a higher purpose. Yes, the blood helps, the oxygen helps, everything helps your system to function, but it's not the primary goal of why you exist as a person. Similar to a business, cash flows, revenues, but you find that businesses usually are created because they have a contribution they want to make or a problem they want to solve. Usually, it's packaged in the form of a product or a service. And in doing that, bringing that product to the market, bringing that service to the market, to the people who need it, you are creating value and you're getting rewarded with revenues, sales, profits, reputation, social good, awards, regulatory support, partnership with even international partners, local partners, with the communities, the love that people may attach to your brand, and so on and so forth. So you see that it's not just about, how much money did I make? How much money did I lose? It's not just about, what's my own bonus as the CEO this year? So it's a reminder that, as a business leader, you have a purpose which your leadership should be achieving. Ensure that the mindset behind what you're doing is not just short-termism. It's actually something that goes even beyond when you are no longer the leader of that particular business. So that would be my summary, but it's not just a one this one thing that business is. There's no silver bullet, especially in Africa, where something can be happening in your business in Nigeria, and another place in Africa, something else will happen, right? But I think overall, the idea of sustainability and that longer term thinking, it's already been something engraved in us, whether it's from how we do agriculture, saying, oh, we farm in this land, then we leave it to fallow and we farm on the other land. We have a culture of stewardship, of community consent. It's part of who we are as Africans as well. But sometimes when we get into this, I'm in business, we now want to act as if business is another world where those principles don't apply. And sustainability is just reminding us that yes, you want to survive in the short term, but you are building for the longer term. So please make sure you are doing so sustainably. Thank you. Back to you, Shay, for the next question. Okay, Pedro, I don't know if we lost Shay or people lost me. Which one is?
All right, thank you very much, River. The person that asked that question, I'm sure the person asked. Hello? Please, can you still hear me?
Yes, you can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello?
We can hear you, Shay. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I had the network glitch. So I have a question. How do you think the new age reporting applies to non-profits and Mrs. Oreva?
Sorry, Shay, could you take that again? The question specifically. I heard some parts, but.
So I think this is a two-in-one question. It's a two-in-one question, and it goes thus. It said, as Kelechi Ejemson, he said, how do you think the need for the ESG reporting applies to non-profits? That is one. And he further said, what strategies do you think non-profits in Nigeria can adopt?
Okay, thank you very much for that quick question, Kelechi. So in terms of, before we go to reporting, let's go back to the what we established. The reporting is like the end of the matter. When you are coming back to, like when in the Bible, the talents were given, and then the boss came back and said, oh, what did you do with the talents I gave you? And everybody's reporting, I did this, I did that. So reporting is not really the objective. So for a non-for-profit organization, I think the first thing is to actually identify what your non-profits exist to do. Is it something that is ESG, that ESG issues are material to, such that what does that now mean for your own non-profit organizations disclosures or reporting? So for non-profit organizations, the reporting requirements, depending on if you are reporting back to grantors or donors, or you are doing your annual filing back to governments, this is financial reporting, whether you may not be paying tax, but you still have to do reporting filings back to the regulator. So first of all, identify what kind of disclosures are material to you. I don't think non-profits should start doing sustainability reporting like a typical commercial business, because sustainability reporting is now the in thing. First of all, go back to the objective of your organization. What is material to you? If, for example, you are a non-profit organization, but you have very strong links with commercial activity, maybe as an investor, as a player in something that is industry focused. Of course, yes, you may find some things that you are doing are very material to what ESG reporting and sustainability reporting is. But I would not say that. I would say non-profit should really be looking at even complying with the existing disclosures and filings in Nigeria particularly, and most African contexts. Non-profits are very busy trying to do good, trying to be the stopgap when there are social issues or humanitarian issues, that sometimes they don't take their own organizational sustainability as serious. So I would say nonprofits should look at ESG and sustainability from, first of all, the organizational sustainability, such that they can then serve the social need, environmental need, or economic need that they see. But you may find that a lot of the principles, for example, IFRS S1 and S2, it's specifically looking at reporting for information that investors need. Nonprofits typically should not have investors. They may have donors and grantors, but not that you're trying to return a profit. It should be not for profits. Even if you are for healthy revenues or surpluses, that surplus should be going back into the purpose of the organization or the service you are providing to society. So that would be my 2 cents on that. I think Chika may have something to say about this, because in their work at PwC, you also be working with nonprofits as well. But for a nonprofit that, for example, does investor work, like you're a nonprofit, but you are doing grants to businesses, to SMEs, to medium scale businesses, or for example, now with the net zero objectives and energy transition objectives, renewable energy advancements, there are some nonprofits that are established specifically to invest in businesses in those sectors. It means you have to understand the ESG issues in those sectors so that you then use that for your decision making. So in that way, I say it goes back to what the organization is for. So Chika, I think you can add to what I've said. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moreva. I think you've really hit the nail on the head. Do you need to really assess why you in business? What are you hoping to achieve? And from there, establish strategies built on a sustainability lens to then drive it forward. I really can't add much more to what you said already.
Thank you. So please, we don't want to just see NGOs bringing out sustainability reports because Moreva and Chika said
Exactly.
reports. That's not the idea.
All right. Okay. So network lag over here. Well, I think this one is for Madam Reverend. The person said, you've worked across different sectors. Are there any recurring blind spots in ESG you see in African businesses? Madam Forever.
Okay, I will give you my experience and I will invite Chika to give you data, because we work very closely with PwC, so I kind of have insights to all the background information they have. So I would say yes, there are a number of them, but the one I would probably point to more is because of the sometimes volatile social environment, economic of financial systems that a lot of businesses in Africa operate in. They kind of focus more on things like, okay, inflation, cost of doing business, cost of finance, those things that seem to affect their cash flow on a very short term. Sometimes they have blind spots around things like workplace issues. So the cultures within the organization, even things as simple as implementing paternity and maternity leave, just little something as simple as that is actually a policy or a thing that the business and business leaders know they should do, but just ensuring that those kinds of things actually get done. You have a policy around the health and well-being of your employees. You say you pay HMO contribution so that them and their dependents can have health insurance, and then you're not paying it, or you're not paying it on time. You have pension commitments. They're supposed, as an employer, you're supposed to be contributing to your employees' pensions fund consistently so that they can start reaping the returns when that money is invested. Some people find out maybe they've worked in a firm for 5 years and their employer has not made their pension contribution for 3 years out of that time, meaning the value that their pension contribution should be bringing for them, looking at them planning for their future, the employer is kind of not meeting up to those commitments. So sometimes even just ethical practices in the workplace, I think that's number one. Then number two, which I would say is also a blind spot, I would say a lot of business in Africa is seeing environmental issues as something that is really far off, like this Oyibo thing. But I think in 2025 and now even 2026, when it started raining in January in Lagos, everybody are like, this climate change thing, it's like, it's real. Why is it raining? So I think more of those impacts are becoming more forefront. So people can't really ignore them as much. People are now saying that, if I was going to go to the market to buy a particular product, now the rain has come at a time it should not come. It has affected the ability of the farmer to produce this raw material I need. So where am I going to get it from? So now more and more businesses, especially those who use agricultural produce or agro-allied businesses, are now seeing the importance of climate resilience issues, especially things related to food, anything environment. So unfortunately, I think we're now learning. You can't be blindsided again because now the impacts are already here. But I think that was an issue, an area that we ignored for quite a while because we thought it was something very far off or something only important for businesses in the extractive sector. I'm not an oil and gas company. I'm not spilling oil or I didn't do gas flaring. So why should you be telling me about environment? But now I think we're saying that a lot of our businesses are really exposed to the impacts of this thing, even if you're not the one on the causation side of it. Chika, anything to add?
Yes, rightfully said. I think just to also add, right, I think we also find that some companies forget or haven't quite established who their key stakeholders are, who they need to carry along on their journey, who they need to get insights from, right? So that would also help them in prioritizing issues to address and the kind of strategies they need to put in place as well. And I think another issue is in terms of data, underlying data that supports the target. So if you have made a target that you want to expand your business or your product line by XYZ%, right? You need to then also identify what kind of information will feed into meeting those targets and the units or the people or the stakeholders you need to interact with that would help you meet those targets. So sometimes on paper, you might have a target set, but you then forget that, okay, there are certain people that I need to also carry along or to ensure that they're able to or well equipped to support me in meeting those targets. So that data quality is very important as well, in making sure that you identify your key stakeholders to carry them along, and then that you've identified the underlying data needs, right, that would support you in meeting your targets.
Thank you very much, Forever and Chika. We have another question from Antonia Neb, and I think is for both of you. And the question is, with all this information for a sustainability professional in Nigeria, where would be a better focus? To develop skill in preparation for mandatory reporting, that's IFRS 1 and IFRS at reporting frameworks, or building capacity in calculating GHG and advising on net zero and the just transition? So who is going to
Who
take
wants
the
to go
question?
first?
Chika, go first.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so first off, I would want to say that it actually goes beyond that, but because the question has been framed around two options, let me then respond to that. So I think it's important that you have capacity in calculating your emissions first, because if you don't calculate your emissions properly, at the end, when you're reporting, you're going to be reporting inaccurately, right? So it's important that the capacity or the understanding of what they need to be calculating, what they need to be tracking is well established, so that when it then comes to reporting, you wouldn't have much difficulties in quickly getting that information and getting it accurately and consistently. So that's how I want to approach it. But nonetheless, it's very important that capacity on sustainability matters, on helping with strategy, helping in underlying methodologies or calculations for your strategy has to be built first before you then focus on reporting. Reporting is the end goal, like we've said. Madam Reva.
Yes, thank you very much. I support the last speaker. And in addition, I would say that, for sustainability professionals, I know in this part of what we're we want to be very specific. Well, this is the skill I have. This is how I can use it, so that sometimes it makes it very easy for you to make a case for your salary or what you are doing in business, right? And that's important on one hand. But I would say you definitely have to be quite broad. So for a finance, think of it from the angle of, okay, if you were a finance professional in your business, you would not just need to understand accounting principles, right? For, okay, we want to just bring out a profit and loss statement. You also need to understand a lot of other things around cash flow management, how you interact with your bank, treasury options, how you manage money or resources of the business. The finance is kind of the indicator of how those resources are being managed, whether it's assets, actual cash, all the things that the business has. So sustainability is quite similar, just that in this case, what you are dealing with are non-financial things, social, environmental, governance, processes, things. So you do need to have that, you definitely need to have a broad understanding. And yes, of course, if you then want to specialize and say, oh, when it comes to IFRS S1 and S2, I have this very special skill in this area I can deliver, that's fine to do. But it's not an either or thing. If you really want to be a rounded professional that actually can be adding value to the organization beyond, oh, I can produce a sustainability report.
Thank you very much for the answer. And we have like about 2 questions that we'll take. We can't take all the questions now, but we'll appreciate your questions later on, and we can get in touch with the speakers. So this question here is from Olabisi, and it's, what is the relationship between staff well-being and safety issues and ESG? Also, on CSR initiatives by business, are there any regulations that speak to how the activities should be done? I'm speaking from the angle of ethical and safe implementation of CSR. That is from Olabisi.
Okay,
so
if
who's going to go first?
Okay, if I may, if I may take that. So for the first part of the question that is focusing on how, can you take the first part again? Let me just make sure that I didn't mishear.
So it says, what is the relationship between staff well-being, safety issues, and ESG?
Okay. So staff well-being, safety issues, and ESG. Let me say it this way. Staff well-being and safety issues are social concerns under the framework of ESG. So if I'm to break down what ESG means, it means that we're looking at environmental issues, social issues, and governance issues, right, under the topic of sustainability. So when it comes to staff well-being and safety issues, you're looking at people concerns, and that will sit firmly under the S pillar of ESG. So think of ESG as the umbrella, and then staff issues and safety issues are subsets of the social pillar of that umbrella, right? That's essentially the best way to put it. It's just really focused on the people issues, and they are tied together. In some instances, one side might be more significant to the other depending on the industry you play in, but they are still important people concerns nonetheless under the ESG pillar. Cliche, if you can take the second part of the question as well. Or Madam Mariva,
Can I just add to that? Yeah, let me just add to that. So we'll answer that first part, then we'll go to the second one. So the relationship, if you say, well, what's the relationship, is, yes, it's a core part of ESG. So the S in ESG is not just S on the external, meaning the host community where your business operates or your customers, is S meaning even the social that is outside of the business and the social that is within the business. So even things like even the power dynamics or social culture within an organization, it because all those social issues or safety issues regarding the kind of workplace you operate can actually affect how effective your governance system is, how effective your risk management system is. So for example, you have risk management issues around, okay, whistleblowing, that in case people do something unethical, people should be able to report it through a whistleblowing policy. But if you have an environment where if you report, you are the one they will sack, that means that your whistleblowing risk management policy will not work. No matter how you try to package it or dress it up or put in your sustainability report, people will not use the whistleblowing mechanism because the culture in the organization actually doesn't support it, the social culture. So yes, so the S is a core part of ESG. In addition to what you already said, it's not something separate, like, oh, social staff and staff well-being is outside, then ESG. No, it's inside of it. So you can go to the second part of the question.
Okay. I think we'll add extra 5 minutes to this Q&A because we still have lots of questions that have missed out from the Q&A chat box. And I'm very glad that the participants find the session very interactive and very insightful. So we have from Mohamed Buba again. In Nigeria and Africa at large, there are disparities among different organizations.
Can we take the second part of this question? The CSR part.
Second one. Okay, let me.
The second part of that question. I think there was a part where we were asking about CSR.
Second, please. Okay, so on CSR initiatives by business, are there any regulations that speaks to how the activities should be done? I am speaking from the angle of ethical and safe implementation of CSR. Did you get that, please?
Yes. Okay, I think. Okay. I can
All right,
start.
let me go. So the answer I wanted to add for that question was that there may not be any specific regulation, but you find that there's regulation around different things that would apply to the type of CSR initiative you're doing. So if you're doing a CSR initiative where you are collecting a lot of personal information from your beneficiaries, it means the rules around use of private or personal data protection would apply to that your project. Right? If you're doing something that has to do with minors, it means any laws or rules around protection of minors, using their images, getting consent from their parents would apply to your project. So it's not that there's one regulation or rule around, CSR, this is how you must do it. But you may be doing CSR that is education focused, you may be doing CSR that is health focused. So you have to follow the ethical principles related to the type of project you are doing. But in general, for businesses, it's good to refer to the UN principles on human rights and business. At least you get a high level idea of, these are the principles or things you should do when you are dealing with human beings. And this applies to both your own employees or CSR beneficiaries. Chika, anything to add?
Yes, and I think, like she said, there is no one framework that suits all. You always have to consider what your CSR activity is looking to achieve. So if there are environmental aspects to it, you might have to now call on the Nigeria Act for us here in Nigeria, for example, to make sure that you're not flouting any environmental concerns, right? And then I think another framework to also consider when you're trying to implement any CSR initiative is the UN SDGs. That's the Sustainable Development Goals, to try and see which particular target or which goal does that CSR activity help support, right? And look at the targets of that particular goal and see how that can also guide you in structuring your CSR initiatives.
All right, thank you very much, Chika and River. Mr. Mohammed, the question with respect to gaps being closed. I already spoke to that. I'll take this question from Ugochi. So I'll take this question from Ugochi. It says, the theme is apt and it came at the right time. However, a lot at the governance and board level. If the shift is made at the portfolio level, then it then become very easy to drive down at business operational ecosystem level. This can't overemphasize. The way is what for revenue. Okay, so this is just the comments, right? So therefore, let's work together. Let's work towards creditable data, strong governance, structural alignment of reports and practice to standard framework. So she's just dropping her own comments on that, on today's topic. Then this question is from Frederick. Are there established ESG reference framework that Nigeria's tech ecosystem can leverage on or adapt to build simple, scalable tools for measuring and tracking corporate ESG performance? How can this work reflect Nigeria's regulatory environments and business realities. That's from Mr. Fair. The same question from Augusto as well. They are also speaking where to seek and be recommended.
Madam Oreva, I think you're speaking, but we can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Now I'm speaking. Thank you. So we'll go back and establish again some of the things, and we definitely encourage everybody go back and watch the ESG series from like 2024. There are a lot of things we've established with the topics we covered so far. So for ESG and sustainability, it's very industry specific, sector specific, and then business specific. That's why the issue of materiality comes in. So even if you are a fintech or a startup, you could be a startup in the food industry, could be a startup in the logistics industry, be a startup in the finance industry. So we have a lot of fintechs, for example, in Nigeria. For the fintechs who are using tech to drive businesses that are providing financial services, Nigeria already has something called the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles. It's a regulation from the Central Bank of Nigeria who regulates that sector. Right now, the principles do not specifically apply to fintechs, but you already know that, oh, for my sector and my regulator, this is the framework that is applying. You can then use that as a guide, not necessarily as a requirement, but as a guide to start building yours. So even whether you're a startup, whether you're SME, whether you are a large conglomerate, whether you're medium, it's still going to be what's your industry, what's your sector in that industry, what's your own business's specific role, what are the ESG issues that are then material. So you have to do your ESG materiality assessments really to know, oh, which one applies to me at what point and how. That would be my answer to that question. So please go back and establish from the materiality phase. Don't just look and start trying to do sustainability reporting. You must go back and establish what is related to your business or material to your business and your stakeholders. And then from there, you build a strategy around it.
And to add to that, right, I think it's also important if you're looking at the aspect of what you can build, right, you need to also look at what aspect of the ESG data or sustainability data are you looking to address, right? You might find more commonly now that most tech businesses are looking to build tools that would help businesses calculate their emissions, for example, right? And in doing so, they'll be relying on the GHG protocol because that's a known approach or methodology for people calculating their emission data. So if you're looking to then build a tool that is going to speak to sustainability reporting, a relevant framework might be something like the IFRS S1 and S2 that we've mentioned, that is the standard that will be used in Nigeria, for example, and most of the world, right, going forward. So it's important to first identify what aspect of the data you're looking to support or the tool you're trying to build, and then their frameworks then now support that. And then I think the question that was asking about what tools or specific software that can help with sustainability data, I think companies like Oracle and SAP, they are currently enhancing their solutions to integrate sustainability and helping companies be able to manage their sustainability data as well.
Yes, I think even Sage, the people that have like an accounting software, they're also trying to do something for ESG information. I think they already have something. I'm not sure how extensive yet, but they do. Okay, Shay, I think we have
Thank
two
you
other
very
questions.
much, Madam Oreva. All right, thank you very much. Can anyone hear me? All right, thank you. Sorry, my network is messing up already and it's past the time. So one final question for both of you. So if we could give the organization on this call or individuals on this call just one clear assignment or action to take this week, like this week, entering the next week, what would it be?
Can I go? Okay, if you've not done your proper sustainability and ESG materiality assessment, please get that done this year. Just commit to do that this year because that's the starting point. If you already have it, I think you should establish an effective way of integrating it into your management meetings or your executive meetings so that it becomes part of what you are discussing as part of the business, not something that comes up later on. So that would be my advice or last encouragement.
I think for
Thank you
me,
very much, Madam Forever. Over to you, Chika.
yeah, I think for me, it's quite important that we take an assessment of where we are currently and what we want to achieve, so that can also help you see the targets or the goals you need to set to push the business or push you to where you want to be. So it's important that you assess where are we now, what do we want to achieve, and then use that to build.
Thank you very much, Madam Chika. Thank you so much, Madam Forever. Today, before we close, we'll be dropping the feedback link where we want all our participants to give us feedback for this session. We want to get feedback on what the discussions we have from our speakers today. I will drop the link on the chats box. And for organizations interested in partnering with us on ESG initiatives, we'll also be sharing the partnership interest link shortly. Please proceed to complete the form and our team will reach out to you with next steps. And as we wrap up today's session, I'd like to say a very big thank you to all our partners and most importantly to our speakers today from Olakweju Ibekwe, from Oreva, to Chika. Thank you very much for sharing your insight. It was very, very generous. The presentation was, like, we still have lots of questions yet, but we really can't take them. I'm sure you all should gather your questions, drop it in the feedback while you're filling your feedback form. And we'll also be having our fiscal session during the Africa Social Impact Summit. And there you can ask your questions directly. One on all our speakers will be available. Thank you to the audience. Thank you all for participating in this session. Thank you for last year, for 2024 as well. We're a very strong community, and we can see that these ESG conversations are quite meaningful. Thank you very much. And I don't know if our speakers would have final words to our participants today. Any final words from Oreva and Chika?
Okay, thank you very much for having me and listening to us. I've enjoyed facilitating today. And thank you everyone for the questions and the interactions. David had put a question. I think I'll just use my final comment to make a comment about the question by David about what's the role of corporate philanthropy and CSR. I think corporate philanthropy really helps to will really be helping to shape the social good that companies already do, because it's already been there as a general practice, but really applying these principles around verifiable data, integrating it into governance, making sure that it's actually part of, it's not a side or an afterthought, would really help to shape the social good that businesses can make. And then the question, or another thing that will also be coming up, is there's going to be a lot more need for impact tracking when it comes to philanthropy and CSR activities. So that would be my last comment. And thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Shay, for hosting us. And Olapeju, see you on the next time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, over to you, Madam Chika. Any last word, comments? Oh, I guess she's having a network glitch. She's having network glitch. I don't know if she's still on the call. All right, I'm pretty sure she's also going to say the same thing as what Madam Forever said, and I'm very sure she'll enjoy. All right, thank you all for your time. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your commitment as well to building a more sustainable and resilient organization. I want you to all to enjoy the rest of your day. Bye. Thank you.